standing in cell block 1. 1, 2, and 3 opened in 1829. The architecture didn't end until cell block 15 was opened in 1959, so that's quite a long span, isn't it? Oh, and they are all numbered chronologically. So, anyway, just so you guys get your bearings, we've got 4 stops in here. We're going to start talking a little bit about the founding of this prison, more than we said outside. Then architectural section, then there are 2 open cells that you guys can explore a bit. Then we'll get into modern history, then we'll be in the center surveillance hub. And it's heated there, and the bulk of our history and our cold will be over, and then we'll wrap up finally in cell block 8. The whole tour should last an hour. Okay, so outside we were talking, right, about how the facade is supposed to look like a castle and why. John Havland is referencing another type of building for the interior elevation of this place. I know it's a bit difficult to tell when it's ruined, but can any of you discern what type of building the cell block is supposed to look like? A church, yeah.
Monastery.
I've almost stopped asking that question, but anyway, yeah, it's supposed to look technically like a cathedral. We have this long, high barrel vault that makes it like we're in the nave of a cathedral, or the place where the congregation would gather. The cells split off either side, as if they're in the aisles. I don't know if you guys know, but often in cathedrals, every unit or bay of an aisle is given over to a chapel. And so every cell then is acting like a chapel. And what are you supposed to do in those spaces?
Pray.
Yeah, pray. I think Eastern occupies such a neat place in American architectural history because it's like the first big building in this country where the form given to the architecture is actually sympathetic with the idea of reform. So I mean, well, you don't generally go to church to become a worse person, do you? Or, I guess not. Well, if you do, I say that's an eccentricity. So anyway, that's why it's supposed to look like a church in here. I kind of wish Havland would have chosen a different type. But I guess because again, it makes it kind of hard to say this prison's secular. But if you're going with inspiring architecture, I guess cathedral's a pretty good thing to do. But anyway, we're standing in front of this picture because we need to talk about that too. This is an engraving done of Newgate Prison in 1818. It's in London. And so 1818 was only 3 years before Eastern State started being built. And it was founded in direct reaction to prisons like this one, because there were problems all over the place. First, the point of prison wasn't punishment in itself, but it was like a human warehouse to store all stripes of criminals, from like debtors all the way to murderers, before they could have a different kind of physical punishment administered to them. That spanned everything from like straight out execution down to whipping, branding, being put in the stocks and pillories, like where you've got your neck and hands bound and stuff. So problem number 1, physical punishments don't reform people. As a matter of fact, well, it seems between the public humiliation, the injury, it made people even worse, even more likely to turn right back to crime. I guess they were thinking kind of, well, society has certainly spurned me, so now I've got all the more license to lash right back out. Inside jails too, though, big problems. Probably the most immediate, I'd say, is disease. Jail reform in Europe came about largely when jurors, lawyers, judges started getting ill and dying from exposure to inmates. Also though, this is kind of interesting, jailers did not get any income save for the fees they extracted from inmates. Inmates were expected to pay room and board. If they had money, great. If they didn't, their possessions, even their clothing, would be pawned from them so they could pay the fees. Of course, that means all kinds of social privileges as well. If you do have a lot of money, you can get out of jail free, or not free, but for some kind of big sum. But also another popular thing to do seems to have been going out to the pub every night. I don't know how they were trusted, but I guess the environment was more bearable if people were intoxicated all the time. And finally, does it look to you all like these inmates are all that great for each other's moral development? It's a bit of a nest device, isn't it? I mean, we've got gambling down there, right? In the corner, I think the current term is that guy's getting jumped. We do have a lot of school groups here. So, really, coming off systems like this one, does it make a bit more sense now why the founders here, that Philadelphia Society, I won't say the rest, thought, okay, if we're going to reform inmates, on the one hand, we can't have physical punishment, and on the other, if inmates are going to stand the chance to repent and to want to be better, it's not very good for them to be exposed to each other's influences. So that's where penitence and solitary confinement come out of. They were only benefiting from the knowledge that systems like this one didn't work to reform anybody. Now we know solitary confinement doesn't either. Like, who remembers the Unabomber? He's in solitary confinement. So now really it is used as a measure of punishment of just trying to contain the prisoners who are so bad that they can't mingle with anybody else. But anyway, what solitary confinement meant in practice for the early inmates here is when he or she was brought in, he'd get a typical sentence of 2 years, because that was the amount of time given for theft. And it seems for a good long while, the number one crime here was horse theft. It's like comparable to stealing somebody's car today. The grand scale of things, it's not really nice, but it's not a terrible crime either, as far as they go. So during those 2 years, the inmates would get 23 hours per day inside their individual cell. They would get 1 hour per day out back in their individual exercise yards. But again, that time was totally solitary. And beyond that, they were supposed to keep completely silent, and they were supposed to have no contact with the outside world either. That meant no news, no letter writing, no visitation. I know it sounds kind of harsh. The whole thought was just to concentrate their focus on their penitence. So that's what the system looked like early on. Now, any questions before we move on to the architectural section? Okay, we're just going to progress a bit of the way down the cell block. I'll stop at our next stop, so come on back.